You know that feeling, right? You've got a deadline coming up, like really coming up, and suddenly the thought of reorganizing your sock drawer is the most appealing thing in the world? Or is that just me?
Okay, maybe it's not just me, but either way, it's time to talk about procrastination. It's like the ultimate productivity killer, the master of delay. But here's the thing, what's really happening in our brains when we choose, say, an epic Netflix binge over that big, important project? Well, that's what we're diving into today, taking a deep dive into the science behind WHY we delay.
And we're doing that with this research paper you sent over, right? Procrastination,
Yeah,
the neurological basis of delayed action.
you got it. This paper is like mind-blowing. It's not just some self-help stuff. This is legit science. It's telling us what's going on in our brains when we hit that snooze button on life.
What I find fascinating is that it really digs into the idea that procrastination isn't just laziness.
Okay, thank goodness.
It's way more complex and interesting than that. It's like our brains are playing this intricate game with us. And this paper, it's like it uncovers all the rules.
I'm so ready to hear these rules because seriously, it can't be as simple as, oh, I'm just lazy. I refuse to believe it.
So you're saying it's not just me blaming my overflowing inbox on my neurons misfiring. There's actually scientific evidence to back this up.
Absolutely. This paper dives right into the brain regions that are involved. It's like, imagine a control center. You know, it's supposed to keep everything running smoothly, but it's struggling. Take the prefrontal cortex, for example.
Prefrontal cortex, that's like our brain CEO, right?
Exactly. It's the command center for planning, making decisions, all those executive functions we need to just function.
Okay, so that's why I cannot resist the siren call of cat videos when I have a report due. My prefrontal cortex is slacking off.
Well, it's more nuanced than that, but you're on the right track. See, studies have shown that people who chronically procrastinate have reduced activity in their prefrontal cortex,
Interesting.
especially when they're trying to do something that requires, focus and planning. It's almost like,
Like their brain is saying, nope, not today.
exactly. Research by Hugh and his team in 2018 really showed this link. Less active prefrontal cortex, more likely to procrastinate. So next time you're struggling to focus, remember, maybe, just maybe, your prefrontal cortex needs a little pep talk.
Or a nap. Maybe needs a nap.
Okay, I'm starting to see how our brains aren't exactly wired for choosing productivity every single time. But what about those tasks? The ones that just fill us with this sense of dread, the ones we put off even thinking about, let alone actually doing.
It's like our emotions just hijack our best intentions. We know we should do the thing, but then, nope, Netflix, here we come.
You're hitting on another big piece of the procrastination puzzle: emotions. Our feelings play a huge role, and this paper points to a part of the brain called the limbic system, specifically the amygdala, as a key player. This part of the brain is all about our emotional responses, especially fear and anxiety.
Okay, the amygdala. That sounds familiar. Isn't that the part of the brain that's responsible for our fight or flight response? Like if we see a bear in the woods, that's the amygdala kicking in.
Exactly, it's constantly on the lookout for threats.
But deadlines aren't bears, or are they?
Well, to our brains, sometimes they might as well be. See, research suggests that when we think something is going to be really hard or unpleasant, our amygdala, it triggers that avoidance response. We basically try to escape those negative feelings. And what's our escape route? Procrastination. Even if, in the long run, it makes those feelings even worse.
So it's not just me being bad at managing my time. It's my brain trying to protect me from feeling bad. I got to admit, that's kind of fascinating. I mean, my brain's got my back. It just goes about it in the most unhelpful way possible.
Right. Our brains really do love that instant gratification, don't they? And that plays a role in all of this, too.
That dopamine rush is real, let's be honest. It's like my brain saying, who cares about that boring report due next week? Have some instant gratification right now. Watch this cat video. You deserve it.
That's a great way to put it. It really all comes down to our reward system. It's wired to prioritize those immediate rewards over the delayed gratification of finishing something, even if that delayed gratification would be much, much better for us.
So we're fighting against our own biology here. Our brains are literally wired to choose the quick dopamine hit over the satisfaction of a job well done. I'm starting to feel like my brain is setting me up for failure here.
It's true that our brains can sometimes be our own worst enemies.
You're telling me, but I'm sensing a but coming. There's got to be more to it than just our brains going rogue on us, right?
You're right. It's not all about our brains being unfair or working against us. This paper also delves into the psychological side of things, the ways we think and feel that make us more or less likely to procrastinate. Things like how we perceive time, how we view our own abilities, all of that plays into it too.
Okay, so it's not all my brain chemistry's fault.
Yeah.
I was starting to feel personally victimized by my prefrontal cortex. So, what are these psychological factors that are messing with our motivation? What's the psychology behind all this? So, spill the tea.
Hmm.
What are these psychological factors that make us procrastination prone?
Well, one is time perception. You know how we always hear that procrastinators have a warped sense of time?
Oh, yeah.
Well, it turns out it's not just a funny thing people say, there's actual research to back it up.
Really? You mean it's not just me constantly running late because I think I can get ready in 10 minutes when it actually takes like 30?
You're definitely not alone there. This paper, it mentions this study, right, by Diaz-Morales and Ferrari from 2015, and they found that procrastination and this distorted time perception, they go hand in hand. We underestimate how long tasks are going to take, which of course makes us more likely to delay starting them.
It's like that saying, work expands to fill the time allotted, except for procrastinators. It's more like we shrink the time we think work will take so we have an excuse to put it off.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so time bending aside, what else makes us procrastination prone? What about that feeling of, I can't even start this, what if I mess it up? That fear of failure.
Ah, you're talking about self-efficacy, right? That belief in our own ability to succeed at something. Low self-efficacy. That's a major contributor to procrastination. If you don't think you can do something well, why would you even start?
Right, why put yourself through all that if you think you're doomed from the start?
Exactly.
But what about the opposite end of the spectrum? What about those of us who are, let's just say, recovering perfectionists? Does that tie into procrastination too?
Absolutely. Perfectionism, it's like this double-edged sword. Wanting to do well is great, but this paper, it points out that certain types of perfectionism, socially prescribed perfectionism, can actually make procrastination worse.
Okay, I think I need a little help with that term. Socially prescribed perfectionism.
Hmm.
What is that?
It's basically that pressure to meet everyone else's expectations of you instead of your own standards. It's that fear of being judged as not being good enough, so you just end up doing nothing at all.
Wow. So it's not even about being perfect, it's about being perceived as perfect.
Yeah.
That's a recipe for disaster right there.
It really is. And of course, we can't forget about impulsivity. Think about it. Are you easily sidetracked by, let's say, a notification on your phone, a funny video?
Who? Me. Distractible. Never.
I think we all struggle with that to some degree, especially in this day and age.
Right. Like everything is designed to grab our attention these days. It's hard to resist.
Exactly. And impulsivity, according to this paper, it goes hand in hand with procrastination. If you're constantly giving in to that immediate gratification, well, you're more likely to fall into that procrastination trap.
Makes sense. But this is all starting to feel a little overwhelming. Like all these things working against us, our brains, our emotions, our fear of judgment. It's no wonder we procrastinate.
It can feel that way, but the good news is that once we understand what's really going on, we can start to find solutions that actually work. We just need to learn how to outsmart our own brains a little bit.
I'm all ears. So before we move on to those solutions, let's talk about the potential consequences of all this procrastination. Because we've been joking around a bit, but it's not always a laughing matter, is it?
No, not at all. Chronic procrastination, it's not just some quirky habit. It can really impact our well-being in a lot of ways, both physically and mentally.
Okay, so chronic procrastination, not so great for our peace of mind or our physical health. Got it.
Yeah.
But we're not here to just wallow in our procrastination despair, are we? We're here for solutions. So what does this research say we can actually do about it?
Exactly. And the good news is this isn't a hopeless case. This research paper actually offers some really practical strategies for overcoming procrastination.
Okay, I like the sound of that. Hope is good.
Oh, okay.
So these strategies, they're not just about like masking the problem, right? They're actually addressing those root causes we've been talking about.
Exactly. They get to the root of it, both neurologically and psychologically.
Okay, I am so ready. Hit me with your best shot. My to-do list and I are ready for a change.
All right. Well, one of the most effective approaches, and this comes up a lot, is cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
CBT. Okay, familiar with it, but how does that help with procrastination specifically?
So CBT is all about recognizing and then changing those thought patterns and those behaviors that lead to procrastination in the first place. So instead of that voice in your head saying, this is way too hard, I'm never going to finish it, CBT helps you reframe that to something more constructive.
Like what? Give me an example.
Sure, like, okay, this might be challenging, but I can totally break it down into smaller, more manageable steps.
So it's like giving my brain a pep talk. but like a pep talk backed by science.
Exactly. And the research on this is really interesting, particularly when it comes to procrastination. It's about rewiring those neural pathways, creating new, healthier habits.
Sign me up for that brain rewiring. Okay, what else? What other procrastination busting tools are in your arsenal?
Well, there's this really cool concept called implementation intentions.
Implementation intentions. That sounds intense.
It sounds more complicated than it is. It's actually pretty straightforward. You're basically making a concrete if-then plan.
Okay, I think I'm following.
So instead of just saying, yeah, I'll work on that report later, you say, if it's 3 p.m., then I'm turning off my phone and I'm focusing on that report for 1 hour.
So I'm like outsmarting my brain's love for instant gratification by scheduling it in.
Precisely.
Love it. Okay, what about those of us who maybe were a little, shall we say, emotionally driven
Yeah.
when it comes to procrastination? Like those moments where anxiety and fear are calling the shots, not logic.
Right. For that, mindfulness can be really, really helpful.
Mindfulness. Okay, yeah, I've heard of that.
Mm.
How does that work to combat procrastination, though?
So it's all about being present, right here, right now, without judgment, noticing those emotions but not letting them take over.
Okay, so instead of being totally overwhelmed by this wave of, I can't even, it's about riding the wave.
Yes, you got it.
Acknowledge it, but don't let it control your every move.
Exactly. And research has shown that mindfulness training, it actually helps people manage their emotions better, which, you guessed it, leads to less procrastination.
Love it. Strong emotions meet my even stronger mindfulness game. Yay! All right, so we've got CBT for tackling those negative thought patterns, implementation intentions for outsmarting our impulsive brains, and mindfulness for managing those big, sometimes scary emotions. Anything else we can add to our anti-procrastination toolkit?
Oh yeah, don't underestimate the power of your environment. This paper, it really emphasizes how important it is to have a space that actually helps you focus and minimizes distractions.
Wait, you mean my perfectly curated collection of knickknacks and that pile of laundry I've been meaning to fold might be impacting my productivity?
It's possible. Sometimes just finding a quiet workspace or even just putting your phone on Do Not Disturb or using one of those apps that blocks certain websites can make a world of difference.
You're telling me I should actually DO something about my phone's constant notifications instead of just glaring at it? Okay, point taken.
Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective.
It's all about setting yourself up for success. I can get behind that. So we've covered a lot of ground here. Any other resources people can check out if they want to, like really geek out about this stuff?
Absolutely. If you're really interested in this whole thing about time and motivation, you should check out temporal motivation theory.
Ooh, that sounds interesting.
It basically gives you this framework for understanding how we think about time and reward and expectancy and how all of those things influence whether or not we're motivated to do a task.
Very cool. I'll definitely be looking into that. This whole deep dive, it's given me such a new perspective on procrastination. Like, it's not just me being lazy or lacking willpower. It's so much more complex and interesting than that. It's how our brains are wired. It's our psychology. It's our environment. It's all connected. What's your biggest takeaway from all of this research?
You know, it's amazing how much we're learning about something that feels so universal, right? But I think for me, the biggest thing is realizing that procrastination isn't a character flaw. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's a problem that we can solve. By understanding what's happening in our brains and why we do the things we do, we can approach it all with a little more kindness and hopefully find strategies that actually work for us.
So well said. This has been incredibly insightful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. I always love a good deep dive.
Now, for a final thought to ponder, we've talked about how technology can be a huge distraction. But what if it's actually changing how our brains work? What if it's making us crave that instant gratification even more than we used to? Just something to think about as you tackle that to-do list.